My name is Melissa Carter and I'm 36 years old. Last April, I sent one photograph to my family's group chat. My 8-year-old daughter, gray as the hospital blanket under her, hours after open heart surgery. Under it, I typed, "She's asking for you." My brother answered first. "Kind of slammed today, handle it." Then my mother, she pulled through. "Stop making her our problem." 13 people were in that chat. Not one of the others said a single word. I wrote back, "Understood." Set the phone face down on the tray table and went and cried in the stairwell where my daughter couldn't hear me. 4 months later, at 9:50 p.m. on a Thursday in August, my mother and my brother dropped their phones in 2 different rooms on 2 different sides of the same city at the same minute. Before I tell you what was on the news that
It's
night,
just not that
you need to
simple.
hear what my family had
it's
been
not.
doing with my daughter's heart while I sat alone in that hospital, because those 2 texts were nowhere near the worst of it. Welcome back to Silent Karma Stories, where quiet people finally say what took years to say, and families find out too late what silence actually costs them. If stories like this tend to find you exactly when you need them, drop a comment and subscribe. Now let me take you back to February, when a routine checkup ended with a cardiologist quietly closing the door behind her. Some background, so the rest of this lands right. I'm a senior claims adjuster for a mid-size insurer in Toledo, Ohio. I spend my days reading fine print for a living, which means I can smell a story that doesn't add up before anyone finishes telling it. I rent a 2-bedroom townhouse on the west side with my daughter Lily. She's 8, sharp in a way that catches adults off guard, and she draws our family in marker whether they've earned a spot on the page or not. She was born with a heart defect surgeons patched when she was a baby, and she calls the scar down her sternum her seam. She says it the way other kids describe a cool scar from a bike accident, like a badge, not a wound. My mother, Diane, lives 15 minutes away in the house my brother and I grew up in, the one with the porch flag and the church bulletin still magneted to the fridge from whatever Sunday it last was. My brother, Brian, is 40 and owns a used car dealership on the north side of town. His face is on a billboard off the interstate, grinning next to the words, "Family you can trust." Our father died 8 years ago. Heart problems run in this family. So does our particular way of handling them, which is to make absolutely sure the neighbors see us handling them well. I built my own life starting at 20, working 2 jobs while I finished my degree at night, and I learned early that in our house, love was a debt you serviced by never asking for anything back. I was the daughter who fixed things quietly. Brian was the son who announced things loudly. My mother managed the difference between us like a portfolio. For 16 years that arrangement held, mostly because whenever it cut me, I said the only line I was ever trained to say, "It's fine." By the end of February, that arrangement, and both hearts in this family, the real one and the performed one, was about to be stress tested past its limit. The last week of February, Lily went in for her regular cardiology follow-up, routine, the kind I'd sat through a dozen times with a magazine I never actually read. Except this time the echo ran long, the tech stopped making small talk, and Dr. Whitfield came in and closed the door with a softness that I felt travel straight down my spine. The valve they'd repaired when Lily was an infant was failing faster than the models predicted. She used calm words, regurgitation, dilation, surgical window, and then one sentence with no calm left in it at all. "We shouldn't wait past spring. Open heart surgery, a valve repair, at a children's hospital in Columbus, 90 minutes south, sometime in the next 6 to 8 weeks. I did what I always do when the ground moves. I made a list. I called the insurance company from the parking garage, my own industry, and I still stayed on hold long enough to memorize the hold music. I asked about out-of-pocket maximums, pre-authorization, lodging near the hospital. Then, because some habits outrank good sense, I called my mother. I told her that her granddaughter needed her chest open to keep living. There was a pause, and I could hear the same kitchen clock I grew up under ticking in the background. My mother's first question wasn't whether Lily was scared, or whether I was, or what the surgeons gave for odds. Her first question was, "Have you told people yet?" I remember staring at my own reflection in the car window and genuinely not understanding the question. I understood it fully within 48 hours because by the weekend, without one single call to me, my daughter's face, missing front tooth, Easter dress, was online asking strangers for money. The campaign was called Hope for Lily. Brian built it on a Friday night, and by Saturday morning it had my daughter's school photo, a paragraph about our family's fight, and a fundraising goal with a lot of zeros. He never asked me, he never even told me. I found out when a coworker hugged me in the break room and said she'd already donated. My mother shared it to every group she belonged to, captioned, "Prayer Warriors, our Lily needs you." Within a week it had gone the kind of viral that mid-sized cities do. A local news segment followed, and I want you to picture the staging, because it matters. Brian sat in the interview chair in a navy blazer. My mother sat beside him holding a framed photo of Lily. I was invited to stand just behind them, slightly out of frame, like furniture that could cry on cue. The reporter, a sharp woman named Nora Bishop, asked Brian what the community's support meant to him. He put a hand over his heart and said family was everything to them. The total crossed $38,000 that night. I'll be honest, part of me was grateful. Surgery is expensive even with good coverage, and I've never had the kind of pride that argues with help. What I had instead was an adjuster's instinct, a small cold spot at the back of my neck, watching every donation route through one person. Not the hospital, not Lily's mother. The organizer of record with sole control of withdrawals, Brian Carter. The same man who was about to be kind of slammed the day his niece came out of surgery. I want to be clear, because I know how stories like this get told. I did not just sit back and trust the process. In the first week of March, when the hospital requested a surgical deposit, I emailed Brian in writing, politely, invoice attached, asking him to either transfer the campaign to me as Lily's guardian or wire the deposit straight to the hospital's billing office. I copied my mother. I included the platform's own instructions for transferring a fundraiser to the beneficiary's family. It's a form. It takes minutes. Brian called instead of writing. I'd learned that was a pattern, and told me the money was in an account, that there was a process, and that I needed to trust the family. Then he did send something, $1,800. I know the exact figure because he handed it to me in a parking lot as an oversized novelty check, while a photographer from his dealership snapped photos for the campaign page. The caption read, "First disbursement to our brave girl." The comments filled with heart emojis. Here's what I couldn't do about it, and believe me, I checked. The platform gives full control to the organizer. I had no legal claim, not without a lawyer, and I had a daughter being scheduled for open heart surgery in 5 weeks, a job I couldn't afford to lose, and pre-op appointments in another city. You cannot fight a war and pack a hospital bag at the same time. So I did the one thing I had room for. I bought a plain black binder and started printing everything. Screenshots, dates, that grinning novelty check, old habits from a career built on reading fine print. It would matter later. They wheeled my daughter away from me at 7:10 on the morning of April 9th. She was wearing a surgical cap covered in cartoon stars and told the anesthesiologist to please be careful with her seam. I signed the consent forms with a hand I ordered not to shake, then sat in a Columbus waiting room for 8 hours and memorized the pattern of the floor tiles, 9 of them between my chair and the vending machine. I texted the family group chat when she went in, a thumbs up from a cousin. Nothing from my mother, nothing from Brian. Around noon, a nurse named Denise, who had no reason to know my name, brought me a coffee I hadn't asked for and said, "Nobody should have to count tiles alone." I've thought about that sentence more than almost anything my own family ever said to me. At 4:15, I checked my phone for news from the OR, and my thumb landed on social media instead. That's how I found out where my family actually was, the Hope for Lily gala, a hotel ballroom across town, string lights, a step-and-repeat banner with my daughter's face printed on it a dozen times. My mother in a floor-length dress, wearing a satin sash that read Team Lily. Brian at a podium in a tuxedo. The post went up while my daughter was still on the table, captioned, "Tonight we celebrate hope." They had scheduled a party in her honor on the exact day of her surgery, 90 minutes north, and hadn't told me, and hadn't come. I sat with that the way you sit with a cracked rib, shallow breaths, no sudden movement. Then the double doors opened and Dr. Whitfield came out in her scrub cap, and everything else in the world went quiet, because her face was about to tell me whether I still had a daughter. She made it. The repair held. Dr. Whitfield said the word successful, while I gripped her forearm like a woman going over a waterfall. They let me into the pediatric ICU that evening. If you've never seen your child right after heart surgery, I'll spare you most of it. She was the color of the sheet, more wires than blanket. But around 8:15, she surfaced, found my face, and asked the question she'd apparently been saving under the anesthesia. Did Grandma come? I told her Grandma knew she was safe. Lily nodded seriously and said, "Tell her I still have my seam." So I took one photograph. My girl, pale and small and alive, one thumb half raised. I sent it to the family group chat. 13 people, the whole roll call. I typed, "She's out, she's stable, she's asking for you." The gala I'd seen on the live stream was hitting dessert around then. Brian replied within a minute. "Kind of slammed today, handle it." My mother's reply landed while I was still staring at his. She pulled through. Stop making her our problem. I stood in that ICU, machines beeping out proof of my daughter's heartbeat, and I read those 2 sentences maybe 30 times. 11 other people saw them. 11 people who'd shared the fundraiser, worn a sash, tagged the hashtag. Not one of them typed a word. I memorized every name in that silence. Then I did what 16 years had trained me to do. I typed, "Understood," put the phone away, walked to the stairwell at the end of the hall and cried with my fist against my mouth so the sound wouldn't carry back to her room. Understood. My whole life in one small, obedient word. Remember it, because the next time I said something like it out loud, there was a camera running. We came home 5 days later to a mailbox that had been busy without us. Hospitals bill in waves, and even solid insurance has a ceiling. Add gas, the parking garage, lodging in Columbus, 2 weeks unpaid to sit in that recovery room, and my spreadsheet put the year's damage north of $9,600. Meanwhile, the Hope for Lily campaign sat on its public page for anyone to read, $104,000. I read fine print for a living. I didn't need a calculator to feel the distance between those 2 numbers. So I wrote to Brian again, formally this time, spreadsheet attached, requesting a disbursement to cover Lily's actual medical costs. 3 days of silence, then a transfer landed, $2,500, memo line, final. I called, and for once he picked up, and in his showroom floor voice, he explained that the rest was earmarked. The family had decided, a committee I was apparently no longer part of, that the remaining funds would be protected and managed properly through something bigger than one hospital bill. "We're building something in her honor, Mel," he said. "It's what's best for everyone." I asked what exactly was bigger than the actual child strangers had donated for. He used a word I want you to hold on to the way I had to. He said, "the foundation." Then he had a customer waiting. If you've ever sat alone in a hospital while your family sent thoughts and prayers from a party, type present in the comments. I read every one of them, and I know I'm not the only quiet one in a family like this watching right now. Subscribe, because what I found out about that foundation is the part nobody believes. It took me 9 days to find what my brother had built with my daughter's name. It had a logo, a bank account, everything really except her, the Lily Carter Foundation. Registered in Ohio in early May. Director, Brian Carter. Treasurer, Diane Carter. Mission statement, supporting families facing pediatric cardiac challenges. A lovely sentence about a category of 1, minus the 1. There was already a website with a donate button, and a photo of my daughter I'd never approved, taken 2 Easters ago. There was already an announcement for a second annual Hope for Lily Gala, bold use of the word annual for an organization younger than the flowers on my porch. The part I didn't find online, I found at a red light on Sylvania Avenue, driving home from Lily's follow-up. A bus bench, my daughter's face printed level with the curb next to the foundation's logo, and beside that, tastefully small, the navy and gold branding of Brian's dealership. Matched fonts, matched colors. My daughter had become a marketing asset with a scar. From the back seat, Lily looked at herself and asked, in the mild voice she saves for genuinely confusing things, "Mom, why am I on a bench?" I told her some people put pictures where everyone can see them. She thought about it. But nobody asked me. 8 years old, nobody asked me. The whole case out of the mouth of a child. That night I opened the binder and started a new tab, labeled in block letters, "The Foundation." I decided to handle it like an adult, at a table, with the person in charge. My mother still hosts Sunday dinner in the house we grew up in. Roast, folded napkins, grace before the meal. I waited until the plates were cleared and asked her, calmly, why there was a foundation with my daughter's name on it that neither of us had agreed to, and where the $104,000 had gone. My mother didn't flinch. She never flinches in front of me. I used to think that was strength. She smoothed the tablecloth flat with her palm, the way she irons things when she's deciding what you deserve to hear, and said, "Sit down, Melissa." I was already sitting. That's a technique. Then she gave me the closest thing to a creed I've ever heard from her. "This family runs on its name. Your father left me nothing else. No pension worth mentioning, no policy worth burying him with. I fed the two of you on that name. I won't apologize for keeping it strong." I said a child's hospital bill wasn't a threat to anybody's name. She looked at me the way you look at a slow student and said the foundation protected the money, that Brian understood optics, that people give to something permanent, not to one girl's bad year. One girl's bad year. That was my daughter's open heart surgery, filed under branding. Then she leaned in and delivered the strangest line of the whole evening, gently, like advice. "Sign nothing without showing me first." As if I were the one running a con on this family, and not the other way around. Here's where being boring became a superpower. Every night that week, after Lily was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with decaf and the binder and did what I do for a living 40 hours a week. I reconciled. Every public post where Brian or my mother announced a dollar figure. The novelty check. The two deposits to me, $1,800, then $2,500, memo final, against my $9,600 spreadsheet of the surgery's actual cost to our household. Dates, amounts, sources, gaps. Numbers don't lie once you line them up and make them talk. And the loudest number wasn't even mine. At Lily's next cardiology follow-up in Columbus, the hospital's family services coordinator sat with me, Priya Anand, mid-40s, warm in the way of someone who's seen everything and still shows up. She was helping me sort billing paperwork when she mentioned, carefully, the way people mention things they're not quite supposed to bring up yet, that the cardiac unit had a family assistance fund. Then she said, "You know, we never actually saw anything from your family's event." I asked what she meant. At the gala, the one held during my daughter's surgery, there'd been an announcement from the podium, a pledge, a big one, made in Lily's honor, to that very hospital. Priya had watched the clip herself, sent around by a colleague. In the months since, the development office had received exactly what I had, nothing. I drove home 90 minutes with one question keeping time with the wipers. How big was the pledge? The clip was still on the foundation's page. 40 seconds of my brother at a podium under string lights, tuxedo, teeth, my daughter's face repeating on the banner behind him like wallpaper. He raises a glass and pledges $20,000 to the Children's Hospital's cardiac unit, in Lily's honor. The ballroom stands and applauds. My mother, sash and all, presses a hand to her chest like she's receiving a medal. 400 people clapping for money that, per the hospital's own records, never arrived. Not that month, not the next, not ever. I confirmed it twice more in writing because I don't conclude before I confirm. The hospital that opened my daughter's chest and stitched her back together had been used as a stage prop, and the applause was still being banked, in shares, in likes, in my brother's smiling headshot, while the actual check stayed imaginary. Sitting with that binder open, I understood something that changed the temperature of everything. Until that night, I'd let myself believe my family was merely vain, tacky, cold in a crisis, but basically harmless, parade people. But parade people still eventually pay for the parade, announcing a gift to a children's hospital and pocketing the applause without ever sending the check isn't vanity. It's theft with a soundtrack, and if the loudest, most public, most checkable promise they'd made was hollow, then the quiet ones, earmarked, protected, the entire $104,000 minus my $4, weren't earmarked for anything but them. I tried the honorable road first, and I want that on the record. In mid-June, I sent a formal letter, actual paper, actual stamp, to Brian as organizer and my mother as treasurer, requesting a full accounting of all funds raised in my daughter's name, as her mother and legal guardian. What I got back wasn't an accounting. It was a summons dressed as a family meeting. When I walked into my mother's dining room, there were no plates, just Brian, his wife Megan staring at her hands, my mother at the head of the table, and a single manila folder squared in front of the empty chair meant for me. I sat. My mother said they were concerned about me. Brian said the word ungrateful, while managing to look sorrowful, a real skill in his line of work. The story had clearly been drafted before I walked in. I was overwhelmed. I was fixating on money. I hadn't been thinking clearly since the surgery. My mother's exact phrase, delivered like a diagnosis. Then, the folder. A media release, professionally prepared, granting the Lily Carter Foundation perpetual rights to my daughter's name, image, and, I read it twice, medical narrative. Perpetual. Her scar, her story, her face on bus benches, indefinitely, in exchange for nothing. Sign it, my mother said, and all of this unpleasantness ends. And here's the part I'm not proud of, but you deserve the truth. I picked up the pen. 16 years of training reached up through my own arm. The old word was already forming in my mouth, warm as bathwater. Understood. Understood. And then, I swear to you, I heard an 8-year-old voice say, but nobody asked me. I set the pen down. My phone buzzed. Columbus number. The hospital. I stood up from that table without signing, walked past my mother's voice, and took the call on the porch of the house I grew up in. It was scheduling. Lily's follow-up echo had come back, and Dr. Whitfield wanted to see us. 2 days later, she showed me the images. The repair was holding, that word again, successful. But there was a residual narrowing that wasn't resolving on its own. The plan was a cardiac catheterization in early January. Not open heart, she was careful to clarify, a catheter through a vessel, a balloon, 1 or 2 nights admitted, routine for them. But it was still my daughter, still her heart, still an operating room with her name on the schedule. And when the billing coordinator slid the estimate across the desk, $8,900 due as a deposit, a fresh deductible on the new insurance year, I understood this had stopped being a story about the past. It now had a due date. That night I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The binder was thick now, my careful reconciliations stacked 3 inches deep. I'd been building it the way you build a storm shelter without admitting what you're bracing for. Time to admit it. I took a marker and wrote on the spine, big enough to read across a room, Lily, everything. Then I opened my laptop, found the fundraising platform's report misuse of funds form I'd been circling for weeks, attached 30 pages, described the pledge that never arrived, the final $2,500, the foundation, the bus bench. I read it twice, then I hit submit. 48 hours later, my brother's name lit up my phone for the first time in a month. He wasn't slammed anymore. The platform did what platforms do when the paperwork is clean. It froze the campaign pending documentation. Every withdrawal stopped. The public page grew a gray banner reading Funds Under Review, which in a town our size is basically a billboard of its own. Brian called 9 times in one afternoon. I let each one roll to voicemail and listened to the pattern like weather moving through. Call 1, the big brother voice. Mel, there's been a misunderstanding, call me back. Call 4, the negotiator. Let's keep this in the family, we can work out a number. Call 8, the victim. You're really going to do this to us? After everything? After everything. I looked around my kitchen for the everything. The group chat, silent through my daughter's surgery, came alive like a stadium. Cousins I hadn't heard from since the ICU suddenly had strong opinions about loyalty. Then, at 9:20 that night, my mother's voicemail, just one, she never wasted calls, she placed them like stones. Her voice was level, almost gentle, which is her most dangerous register. Melissa, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you will not burn this family's name over money. Call your brother, fix what you broke. I played it 3 times, and by the 3rd pass I finally heard what had been true my whole life. She hadn't mentioned Lily, not in the texts in April, not at that dinner table, not now. The money had never really mattered to her either. There had only ever been one patient in my mother's hospital, one heart she'd spent her life keeping alive. The name. The post went up Sunday from my mother's account, in the voice she uses for condolence cards. It never once used my name, that was the craft of it. It spoke of a season of trials for the family, of a young mother under terrible strain, of how illness tests everyone, not just the patient. And then the sentence doing all the work, polished like a doorknob, the foundation exists so every dollar so generously given is protected and properly managed, no matter what pressures any one person may be under. Protected from me. The mother who'd slept upright in a vinyl chair for 5 nights, reframed in one paragraph as the unstable woman the money had to be defended against. It gathered hundreds of reactions before dinner, women I'd known since childhood commenting, "God bless you, Diane, you carry so much." She answered each one with a little sprig of gratitude, tending the crop. By Monday, it had jumped the fence. A client at my office asked my supervisor, delicately, whether I was doing okay. Two mothers at Lily's swim class went quiet in the bleachers the second I sat down, the specific quiet of a conversation you were just the subject of. I had documents. My mother had a congregation. I had numbers. She had decades of casseroles delivered to the right porches at the right funerals. That's a kind of wealth, and she was spending it precisely. I told myself it couldn't touch anything that mattered. My job knew me. My daughter loved me. Paper beats performance. Eventually, I almost believed it, until Wednesday morning when someone knocked on my door who wasn't a neighbor. She was polite, mid-30s, county badge on a lanyard, a caseworker. There'd been a call, anonymous, expressing concern about a medically fragile child and her mother's capacity to provide appropriate care. She was required to follow up. Could she come in? I stood in my doorway and made myself breathe like a professional. Then I let her in, because innocent people with binders let them in. She saw a clean house, a medication schedule magneted to the fridge, dated and initialed. Follow-up appointments on a wall calendar, a stocked pantry, a child's drawings taped at child height. She asked her questions gently, wrote her notes, and weeks later a letter would arrive with the word unfounded, and legally, that would be the end of it. But legally isn't the only ledger. Lily, home that day with a summer cold, had heard the wrong 10 seconds from the top of the stairs, and after the caseworker left, she found me on the landing and asked, "Is she going to take me?" I told her the truth in 8-year-old terms. No, never. She checks on kids and she saw we're okay. Lily studied me the way she studies everything, then delivered her verdict, "We're more than okay." I agreed. I never found out who made that call, and I've been careful never to claim I know. That night my phone buzzed. Megan, my brother's wife. Coffee, not at my house. We met at a diner off the highway on Thursday, the kind with pie under glass and nobody either of us knew. Megan looked like she hadn't slept since spring. For a while she made a fence out of small talk, then stopped and said, "I keep the books for the dealership. You know, Brian can't run a spreadsheet." She slid a plain manila folder across the table and kept 2 fingers on it a moment longer than she needed to. What was on her face wasn't guilt or drama, it was grief. Inside were the foundation's bank statements, May through July, printed a little crooked at somebody's kitchen printer. She walked me through them in a flat, bookkeeper's monotone while my coffee went cold. A 5-figure deposit to a lakeside resort planning retreat. Monthly payments on Brian's new truck, coded marketing vehicle. An invoice from a contractor paid in full, memo, office renovation, for the office run out of the same kitchen where I learned to say understood. Line after line, my daughter's donated heart money walking out the door in work boots. I asked Megan why she was showing me this. She looked out at the parking lot for a while, then said, "Because I sat at that table the night they rehearsed what to say about you, and I kept thinking, my kids are watching this. My kids carry this name too." Then she said the sentence I carried into every room after that. "If you use these, use them right." Not to win. Right. She left first. I sat there with the folder and the binder side by side, her numbers and mine interlocking like teeth, and understood I now held everything I needed to end this. And that paper on a table, by itself, ends nothing. Somebody has to close the circuit and pay whatever it costs. Clipped to the back of the folder was a business card, a name I recognized, Nora Bishop, Channel 12. If you've ever been called difficult for asking a fair question in your own family, subscribe. This channel is for the difficult ones, because what I did with that folder cost me the only family I was born into, and I'd do it again. Nora Bishop had a corner desk and a segment called Follow the Receipts, mostly used to chase contractors who vanished with deposits. I emailed her tip line on a Friday. She called Monday morning before I'd finished my first coffee. We met in a conference room overlooking the parking lot, and I gave her the shape of it, the campaign, the ICU, the texts, the foundation, the pledge that never landed. She listened for 20 minutes without touching her pen, which I've since learned is what she does when it's real. Notes are for maybe. When I finished, she said the thing that made me trust her. "I did the feel-good piece on your brother back in March. Blazer, big check, Family is everything. I put that on air, so I own a piece of this. She was straight with me about the mechanics, and I respected that, being made of them myself. A story like this needs 3 legs or it doesn't stand. 1. Documents. I had 2 families worth of bookkeeping. 2. Independent confirmation. A formal complaint filed with the State Attorney General's Charitable Division, something her newsroom could cite, not just a sister's arithmetic. Priya had already walked me through where that complaint would go. The form had been sitting open on my laptop for a week, waiting for my nerve. 3. And she looked at me the way you look at someone before handing them something heavy, a source on camera, on the record, name and face the audience can weigh. Sources with faces, Melissa, she said. Otherwise, it's gossip with graphics. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading, and it wasn't about me at all. Would Lily sit for it? The segment producer, joining by speakerphone, made it worse by making it practical. 10 seconds of the girl, the scar, maybe, tasteful, just enough that people care. I looked at that speakerphone and felt the whole machine for a second. The same hunger that built the gala, just wearing a press badge instead of a sash. I heard myself say no, with a steadiness that surprised me. No face, no scar, no bedside footage. My daughter had already been a prop in 1 production. I wasn't booking her into a second one with better lighting. There was 1 more piece of arithmetic Nora made sure I did out loud. If the platform confirmed misuse, frozen donations would be refunded to donors. Every refunded dollar was a dollar that would never reach Lily's bills, no matter whose name had raised it. And once I was on the record, any private settlement from my family, repayment, guilt money, whatever it might one day produce, was gone. Nobody writes a check to the woman testifying against them, she said. If you do this, you likely lose the money, all of it. You understand that? I told her I read fine print for a living. I'd never once found a clause where the truth pays retail. Then late July got worse. In the order calamities prefer, schedule, invoice, threat. The hospital called with Lily's catheterization date, 2nd week of January, pre-op the day before, the billing packet followed by mail, deposit line in bold, $8,900, due by year's end. And then a heavy envelope with a law firm's letterhead, a golf buddy of Brian's, I'd later learn, a cease and desist, warning that if I continued making false and defamatory statements about the Lily Carter Foundation, its officers reserved the right to pursue all available remedies. I read it at midnight, binder on my left, bill on my right, letter squared in the middle like a dare, and I won't pretend it didn't work on me for a few hours, because that's what those letters are for, cold fronts made of serif fonts. But truth is a defense to defamation, one of the oldest rules there is. They weren't threatening me because I was lying, they were threatening me because I wasn't. Sometime past 1 in the morning, headlights swept my kitchen window, my mother's car. She came in without knocking, because women of her generation consider a doorbell a formality for strangers. She sat at my table and, for the first time in my adult life, looked her age. No sash, no church voice, just Diane, 62, in a cardigan, car keys still in her hand like she might need the exit. She saw the binder and didn't ask about it. Instead, she told me a story I'd only ever had in fragments. When my father died 8 years back, his policy had lapsed quietly, one of several things he'd let go quietly. There was a mortgage, a funeral, 2 grown kids who still needed launching. She woke up a 60-hour-a-week widow with a casserole schedule. The church fed us for a year, she said. You remember the food. You don't remember why it kept coming. It kept coming because of the name I built. I ironed my funeral dress and smiled. For 8 years, Melissa. Reputation is the only pension a woman like me ever had. For one long moment, I saw the whole of it. The girl who married at 20, the widow doing brutal math in a pew, the woman who learned that being seen as good was the only currency that never bounced. My mother isn't a monster. She's a believer. She believes in the name the way other people believe in God or compound interest. And she fed her granddaughter to it and called it stewardship. Then she reached into her purse and set an envelope on my table. $9,000 cash, for the procedure, and beside it, the media release signature line flagged in yellow highlighter. Take it, sign it. Let us keep what keeps us. I told her no, as gently as no can be said. At the door, without turning around, she said it once more, soft as a prayer. This family runs on its name. The Attorney General's office opens at 8. I was in the parking lot at 7:40 with 2 cooling coffees, and by mid-morning it was done. The complaint ran 40 pages with exhibits: my binder, Megan's statements, the hospital's confirmation that no pledge was ever received. I signed a sworn affidavit, my name in blue ink under the word true, notarized like a wax seal on the old version of my life. There are signatures you can walk back. That wasn't one, and I knew it while the pen was still moving, and my hand stayed level. That afternoon, I sat in a Channel 12 conference room and signed the second document, an on-camera agreement with my conditions written directly into it, initialed by the producer, because I don't do handshakes anymore. No footage of Lily, no photos of Lily, no hospital imagery, no school name, nothing that could let a stranger find my daughter. Nora read my markups and slid them to the producer without comment. He pushed back exactly once. Without the kid, I might lose the 10 o'clock slot. I told him, then lose it. You get the mother and the numbers. Nora wrote that down and said it was the promo. She wasn't wrong. Then I set the binder and Megan's folder on the table, and the room went quiet the way rooms do when weight changes hands. Taping was Friday, air date Tuesday at 10 p.m. Standard practice, Nora warned me, meant the station would call my mother and brother for comment Monday. No ambushes, real journalism knocks first, which gave my family about 30 hours to do their worst, and me 4 days to hold my nerve. The studio was colder than I expected and brighter than daylight. They clipped a mic to my collar, and then it was just Nora, 2 cameras, and the particular quiet that costs money. She walked me through the numbers first, because we'd agreed the numbers were the spine. $104,000 raised. $4,300 to the child's household. $20,000 pledged to a children's hospital on a stage, and never sent. A resort, a truck, a kitchen. I answered like the claims professional I am. Then she asked about the night of April 9th, and I did the thing I'd practiced not practicing. I opened the family group chat and read it exactly as written. She's out. She's stable. She's asking for you. Then Brian, kind of slammed today, handle it. Then my mother, she pulled through. Stop making her our problem. I read them slowly, the way you read numbers into a claim file, because a thing read slowly can't be waved away as temper. Nora let the silence sit. Then, and what did you reply? Understood, I said. Then I stopped, and something I'd carried for 16 years set itself down. I've been saying some version of that my whole life. To my mother, to my brother. It was never actually fine. I just kept absorbing the cost and calling it love. Nora nodded and didn't fill the moment, and I heard a camera operator swallow. Over the weekend, the station cut a 15-second promo. No names, no faces, a blurred novelty check and a voiceover. A local feel-good fundraiser. Where did the money really go? Tuesday at 10. The truest sentence in this whole story, my brother shared that promo on his dealership's page. Caption, hope it's not my competition. Monday afternoon, the station's calls went out. 1 to Brian, 1 to my mother. Tuesday came anyway. At 6 p.m., 4 hours before air, my mother stood on my porch holding a manila envelope thick enough to stop a door. I saw her car from the kitchen window and came out before she could knock. Some conversations don't belong inside a house with a child coloring in it. August heat leaning on everything. Crickets. My porch light not yet on. She held out the envelope and told me what was inside before I could ask. $35,000, full repayment, everything you say we owe, and then some. Brian selling the truck. I took a loan against the house. Her voice was doing something I'd never heard it do. Asking, you call that reporter. Tell her you overstated things. This ends tonight. The foundation dissolves quietly in the fall. The family stays a family. I looked at that envelope, and I'll be honest with you, because honesty is the whole point of this story. I wanted it. It was Lily's deposit and a year of breathing room, and my mother, for the first time in my life, paying a real price to keep me. Every version of me that had ever said understood was standing on that porch in a choir. And the price tag was so small, wasn't it? One phone call, one more absorbed cost. Lily would never know. The donors would never know. Only I would know. Which is how it had always worked. Which is exactly why it had always worked. And I finally saw the machine clearly. My silence was the fuel that ran it, and it would run on it forever, and someday it would teach my daughter to say, understood with her own blood. My mother watched me look at the envelope and made her closing argument, the only one she's ever had. This family runs on its name, Melissa. You are about to burn down the only roof we ever had," I said quietly, because quiet was all I had left and all I needed. "My daughter is not a name, Mom. Names don't sit in waiting rooms." I pushed the envelope back across the space between us, my fingertips steady on the paper, feeling the exact weight of what it cost. Her face came apart just once, just for a second. "You still have 4 hours," I said. "You could spend them calling your granddaughter. She still asks about you." My mother walked to her car. No shouting, no slammed door, just the soft click of a sedan closing, which is somehow the loudest sound I know. I'm told how 10 o'clock looked in 3 different rooms, because 2 of them were described to me later, in detail, by people who were there. In my living room, lamps off, volume low, Lily asleep down the hall with her stuffed rabbit. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, closer to the screen than a grown woman usually sits, the way you watch weather once the sirens have already gone off. Across town, my mother at her church bridge night, 4 card tables and someone's sheet cake. Up north, Brian entertaining clients under a wall-mounted TV he'd personally asked the hostess to tune to Channel 12 because his sharing that promo genuinely hadn't been strategic. It had just been Brian. The segment ran third, after a water main break and before weather. Follow the receipts. Nora's voice level as a carpenter's level, over a graphic building itself line by line. $104,000 in, $4,300 out to the child's family. $20,000 pledged to a children's hospital, on a stage, in a tuxedo, to applause, and per hospital records, never received. Then Megan's statements, printed crooked at her kitchen table, rendered clean in broadcast yellow, the resort deposit, planning retreat, the truck payments, marketing vehicle, the kitchen renovation, office. A spokesperson for the state attorney general confirmed an active inquiry. The platform confirmed the campaign was frozen and donors would be refunded. Then, over a still image of 2 gray text bubbles blown up to fill the screen, my own voice reading them out loud, "Kind of slammed today, handle it." She pulled through, "Stop making her our problem." At the church hall, I'm told, the room went quiet table by table, like windows going dark, until the only sound left was the TV and my mother's phone sliding out of her hand onto the carpet. At the steakhouse, a client said, "Brian, isn't that..." And my brother stood up too fast, and his own phone went down with a fork. 2 phones, 2 floors, the same minute. In my living room, the woman on the screen said, "It was never actually fine." And the woman on the floor finally watched herself mean it. I turned off the TV, and the house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator, and my phone began to fill like a bathtub. By midnight, 190 unread messages. I didn't read them that night. I read the senders' names, which told the story fine on their own. Cousins who'd watched 2 cruel techs land in an ICU and said nothing were suddenly very fluent. A great aunt, 2 church friends, numbers I didn't recognize. And stitched through the flood, my mother calling on the hour like a clock striking. I let everyone go to voicemail and listened to them at the kitchen table with the lights off. 10:30, fury, burn this family, betrayal, a threat about lawyers already spent. 11:15, damage control, eerily composed phrases built for forwarding, misunderstanding, out of context, handling it as a family. And then, at 1:05 in the morning, a voice I had never once heard come out of my mother in 36 years, small, unironed, "Melissa, please." That was the whole message. I sat with the phone glowing in the dark, and I want to be truthful with you the way I've been all along. That one nearly got me. Rage I was braced for, please, had no precedent. I walked down the hall and stood in my daughter's doorway and listened to her breathe. The deep, even, boring, miraculous breathing of a child whose repaired heart was doing its quiet work in the dark. That sound is what I traded everything for. It holds up. Back in the kitchen, I opened the family chat one last time. 13 names, the roll call. I didn't type a goodbye. There was no version of it that wasn't for them. I pressed leave conversation, and the screen asked if I was sure, and for once in my life, I was. By Wednesday, the story had jumped its banks, clipped, reposted, a scroll line on a morning show, strangers in other time zones reading my mother's words to her granddaughter over their cereal. The consequences arrived not as lightning but as paperwork, which is how consequences actually move. Brian's dealership issued a statement with the phrase, "does not reflect our values," and quietly pulled his name off the marketing. The billboard on the interstate was a mattress ad within the month. The foundation announced its own dissolution before the Attorney General could do it the hard way, to avoid further distraction from Lily's recovery, a sentence I'd frame if irony hung on walls. The Frozen campaign resolved exactly how Nora warned it would. Refunds, processed back to donors, every dollar walking home through the same door it came in. I watched the total drain to zero and felt an odd calm. Money had never once behaved like money around my family. Better it go home clean. Then Thursday, Priya called from the hospital, a smile in her voice she wasn't bothering to hide. Donors had been calling the development office all week, refund emails in hand, asking whether there was a way to give so it would actually reach the girl this time. There was. There'd always been. The Cardiac Unit's Family Assistance Fund, hospital administered, audited, applied straight to patient accounts, not 1 cent passing through anyone's kitchen. By the following Friday, it had received enough, earmarked for Lily's account, to cover the January deposit and the bills behind it, with a cushion left over. The money came back for my daughter. It just refused to pass through my hands, or my mother's, or anyone's. Good, that was the whole point. Lily had her catheterization the second week of January. What they promised is what happened, which is all you can ask of medicine. A vessel, a balloon, 2 nights admitted, home by Friday with a juice box habit and a sticker on her chart that read, "Champ." Dr. Whitfield showed me the after images. The narrowing had eased open, the numbers landed where they belonged, and she used the word excellent, which from her is practically a parade. In spring, the Attorney General's office resolved its inquiry the way these things resolve when the arithmetic is undeniable and the lawyers are tired. A settlement, restitution paid into the state's donor reimbursement fund, the foundation formally dissolved, and both my mother and my brother signing an agreement that neither will solicit charitable funds in this state again. Their names, the very thing they were protecting, now on a registry that says so. There are days I find that sentence sad, and days I find it exact, and most days I find it both. Megan filed for divorce in March and moved with her kids 2 streets over from me. We trade school pickups now, which is its own quiet verdict on what a family actually is. And one afternoon in April, almost a year to the day from that first photograph, an envelope arrived in my mother's handwriting. No apology inside. I'd known better than to hope, and hoped anyway. Just one line, written on the back of an old Hope for Lily donation card, my daughter's Easter face on one side, my mother's steady cursive on the other, because apparently even her tenderness has to travel by way of the machine. "You are still a Carter." I stood at the counter a long time. Then I got out the binder, Lily, everything down the spine, and slid the card into the very last sleeve, behind the settlement letter, and closed the cover. Let the name live in the archive, filed and finished. The spine was never about the name, it was about the girl. It always was. We hold Sunday dinner at my house now. It started as a one-time thing in the fall and calcified into law. The good kind. Picture the first warm Sunday in May. My little table with the leaf in. Roast, folded napkins, because some inheritances are worth keeping and some others definitely aren't. Priya brings a lemon cake that never survives to Monday. Denise stops by after her shift when she can, still in scrubs, and lets Lily listen to her own heart with the stethoscope Denise gave her for Christmas. Megan and her 2 kids fill the loud end of the table. Not one adult chair is occupied by anyone who shares my blood, and every chair is occupied by someone who actually showed up. Waiting room, diner booth, lobby, stairwell. Somewhere across town, I'm told, there's a gala that same month. Different cause, same ballroom, same string lights. That machine doesn't stop. It just changes fuel, but it doesn't run on my daughter anymore. It doesn't run on me. Lily reached for her milk mid-laugh and knocked it over, a white lake spreading toward the roast. "Mom, it's fine," she announced, grabbing napkins, and the whole table froze for half a beat at the sound of that little phrase in her mouth. I knelt down next to my daughter, eye to eye, and told her the one thing I know now that I didn't know a year ago. No, baby, some things aren't fine, and we're allowed to say so. Family isn't the people who share your name. Family is the people who show up when the machines are beeping. She considered that the way she considers everything, nodded, mopped up the milk, and asked for more roast. That's my story. one photograph, two texts I will never unread, and a 10 p.m. newscast that cost me the family I was born into and gave my daughter back her heart. If this reminded you of a waiting room you once sat in alone, type present in the comments. And if someone you love needs permission to stop saying it's fine, send them this. Subscribe to Silent Karma Stories, and I'll see you in the next one.